Hello, this is Father Hightower, and welcome to VOXSFX, the voice of St. Francis Xavier Parish in Missoula, Montana. We are so pleased that you have joined us. Your participation enriches our entire community. We hope that our show serves as a point of light, helping to deepen our understanding and experience of the Catholic faith in history. So join us as we seek through prayer, study, interviews, and discussion the roots of the practice of our faith. God bless.
Immigration. Not a complex topic at all. For those of you who may not know me, who may not know my sarcasm, but that was certainly it. We figured we might do this episode because in light of the recent statements of the Holy Father, there's been a whole lot of conversation about this particular topic. I myself have been listening to and reading material that I do and don't agree with from Catholic commentators, some people who are of my political leaning and some people who are not. But I found that it's important to hear these various perspectives because I want to make an educated choice. I want to do what I consider a moral choice. And for me, that means listening to the points of view of people who I may or may not agree with. Before we get started, I do want to state that first and foremost, this is a Catholic podcast, not a political one. We're coming from a Catholic perspective, not trying to bend one way or another, not trying to support one party or another, because that's not our job. Even with this being stated, we also understand that this particular topic might ruffle a few feathers, because there's a lot of people who may disagree with this analysis on political grounds. Unfortunately, there is no way to discuss this topic without doing this, without offending somebody, because of the contentious environment that we find ourselves in. And before we get started, I would like to draw attention to a few Bible verses. Leviticus 19, 33 through 34. Leviticus 24, 22. Deuteronomy 10, 18 through 19. Numbers 15, 15 through 16. Matthew 25, 35. Ephesians 2, 19. And many others state very much the same thing. And this is the teaching that we come from, a gospel teaching, a biblical teaching. Today we have Father Pat Conroy on, and he is going to offer the perspective of a Catholic priest who served as a lawyer in the immigration courts on the southern border. We're going to be analyzing this in line with Catholic teachings, with the U.S. bishops, and with the popes going back as far as I could count. You might find that this podcast, this particular show, might be a little critical of the United States and of its rhetoric and of the handling of the immigration crisis, much like the Holy Father said. Regardless of whether or not you agree with Father Conroy's analysis, I encourage you to listen all the way through, even if you do disagree with his conclusions. Remember that we aren't telling you what to think. We're not telling you how to vote. Hopefully this show serves as a conversation starter and helps all of us examine what we believe and to see if that's in line with the philosophy that we espouse. So I want you to consider his words with an open mind and use them and the other information you have access to form your own conscience. Above all of us have to remember that our church isn't liberal or conservative. It's not Democrat or Republican, but we are all one, united in the body of Christ. Our church has and will outlast any political system. Where is the Roman Empire, the Persian Empire, the Spanish or British empires? They have come and gone. But the church, well, she remains, and she always will. And even if you do disagree with what is analyzed here, I will say right now that I will still be happy to share a pew with you, to raise my voice in worshipful song with you, because like I said, we are all united in Christ. We may disagree on some worldly things, But we must keep our eyes fixed upon the cross. We must keep our minds and our spirits fixed upon God. So with that in mind, I encourage you to sit back and listen as Father Conroy helps us understand the Church's position on immigration. With us in the show today to talk about the ideas concerning immigration and the Church's teaching on it is Father Pat Conroy. Father, thanks for coming on again.
You're welcome. Nice to be here.
So you have a lot of experience with this particular subject, having worked on the border yourself, right?
Correct, with explanation. The full disclosure. Back in 1981-82, when the immigration crisis, quote unquote, in this country was the flooding in of refugees from El Salvador and Nicaragua and Honduras, but mostly El Salvador at the time, families, not criminals, but families who were fleeing a nation where the nation itself, the government, was incapable of protecting or guaranteeing their safety from the violent danger of rebels, but also, ironically, fleeing a government that was itself violently abusing these people that the government would be accusing of helping the rebels. And my clients, so I was in San Francisco, in the Bay Area, I was studying theology, but I went down to the Conference of Catholic Bishops had an immigration office in downtown San Francisco. I walked in the door, told them who I was. I was a lawyer, licensed lawyer in the state of Washington, that I was studying theology, and did they need any help? So immigration law is a very lucrative area of the law, but it's a very small area of the law. Most practicing lawyers do not know anything about immigration law because it's specialized. That's all. I mean, I knew nothing about tax law. It's specialized. So, there are specialties. Immigration is one of those. And those who were engaged in the private practice of it represented, I think they're called H-1Bs, the multimillionaire hires, the people that Dell Computers wanted to hire, that Microsoft wants to hire. And so very lucrative to make it easy for those kinds of immigrants to come in and be very handsomely paid for it. So what that means is that practicing immigration lawyers in San Francisco were not representing refugees who could not pay anything and who fled their home countries in fear and terror without papers or documents because they dare not show up to the government and say, we're getting out of here, give us some papers. So why are you leaving? Are you helping the rebels? Is that why you're leaving? And I'm not making that up. These are the people I represented. I heard their stories. Okay? So not criminals, not cheapskates, not looking for a handout, running for their lives. And they'd come to the U.S., and the Catholic bishops had that office because there are so many of them, and the legal profession wasn't there to represent them. So the Catholic bishops stepped up. Immigration law, by the way, is different than justice law. Administrative law covers immigration law. It's not part of the judiciary. It's not the third branch of government. It's part of the administration. It's the administrative law oversees immigration. And so immigration courts could license, quote unquote, non-lawyers to practice in immigration courts.
Hmm.
So that what you had at the Catholic bishop's office were paralegals who were representing these refugees. Now, one of those paralegals, James Michael Hoffman, was probably the expert in the United States on the immigration code. He could quote it like any Baptist could quote the Bible. Chapter, verse, and the legal cases that populated the code. I mean, the man had an encyclopedic mind.
That's impressive.
Oh, absolutely impressive. So I walk in that office, a lawyer, and oh my God, you'd have thought that I was the second coming, because what that meant is that when they had a case that needed, and this happened once in a while, needed to be filed, taken out of administrative law court into the federal appeals court, they needed a lawyer. That would be me. Okay. All of a sudden, I'm a big asset. And knowing nothing about immigration law, I'm thrown right in the middle of immigration law. So I did that for about 6 months, at the end of which I decided practicing law was not for me. Because I became so enraged at how unjust the exercise of U.S. immigration law can be. Now, we need it. We need immigration law. I'm not saying we don't need immigration. We do need immigration law. Okay, we need it. Which means, like all things, we need to fund it. And that, of course, no member of Congress is getting elected on the promise that I'll spend a lot more tax dollars on immigration. You're not going to get elected if you say that. Now you'll get elected if you say, I'll round up all the criminals and send them out. That's the disingenuity of the debate. Okay, very popular to round up and take out all those foreign criminals that are endangering your children here in Montana. No. Okay, but it works. All right. So I learn the stories of these incredibly desperate people. And the policy of the United States government at the time was that El Salvador was an ally, and we were training Salvadoran military troops at Fort Benton in Georgia. The military was not committing these war crimes against their own people. They were properly prosecuting people, which was not what was happening.
Which
And
is
yet,
what you were hearing from the folks
from
who
the
were coming
people
north, yeah.
fleeing for their lives. And so we're saying we can't give you asylum because you're not in danger in your own country. And we can't say out loud that you are. It's an impossible situation. I'm trying to be open and honest here. What I've experienced, I watch in horror because it's happening again. Now, are there criminal immigrants? Yes, there are. This is where it gets to definitions. 30% of the immigrants who have been rounded up last summer, no criminal record whatsoever. 30%. 1 in 3 of the brown people being rounded up, dropping their kids off at school or going to work at Home Depot. 1 out of 3 not criminal, being arrested by masked and armed people. Where should that ever be acceptable? That means, though, 70% are criminals. About 2/3 of those criminals, the crime is they entered illegally. Not a dangerous crime, not a threat to any human life or any human endeavor. Their criminality is in the fact that they entered without documents, which they can't get.
Because we have another situation in Latin America, much like you experienced in the early 80s.
Absolutely. Most of those coming across the southern border come from Nicaragua, El Salvador, and Honduras. Who's reigning supreme down there? The cartels. Their own governments cannot protect them. And their children are the ones being targeted. And so they're thinking, we got to get our kids out of here. Now, let me remind our listeners, that's Joseph and Mary with Jesus. Why does the Catholic Church feel the way it does about this? Bingo. Right there. That's it. No, we also believe that because when Moses led the chosen people out of Egypt, God, time and time again, through the prophets, you shall protect the powerless, the widow, the orphan, and the stranger or the foreigner in your midst. Why? Because you were once powerless in the land of Egypt, and I saved you. That's why you protect the powerless. And in our time, that's most of these immigrants. That's why the Catholic Church has such a strong position. I encourage you listeners, go to the website of the Catholic Bishops, usccb.org, I think, and read what the bishops have to say about immigration. And then go back 50 years and read everything that was ever said about immigration.
And what the Holy Father says about immigration.
Time and time again. It is so ingrained in our faith as a self-identity thing. You were saved by God. It's now time for you to save the desperate. All right. Now, save the criminals? No, that's not what I'm advocating. It's not what I'm talking about. But when you're rounding up 100 people and 30 of them have no criminal record and another 50 of them, their only crime is that they fled terror and have moved in and living off the public dole? Absolutely not. Committing crimes? No. Statistically, the undocumented in our midst have a much lower crime rate than blue blood Americans.
Well, they don't want to draw any legal recourse.
Well, no. And they're good people. They're not criminals. They're not insane asylum refugees. And there's the rhetoric of it that is so misleading. The Immigration Service puts out stats, 80% of the people we round up are criminals. No, they're not. And unless you say that crossing the border illegally because you're scared to death and desperate, and the American Immigration Service is not funded enough to pass everybody through legally, what are they going to do? What are they supposed to do? It's a humanitarian problem. And it's not just an American problem. And of course, why would they want to come here? Because they want safety of our laws, of our legal system, so they're not criminally minded. Please God, our own governments were acting according to the law in protecting us, but they're not. I know this from my time in immigration work, but I bet dollars donuts is still the case. These people come in and they want to establish residency. In the Immigration Service, when the time comes that they want to actually do something legally, the proof is Social Security payments and their tax payments. They pay their income tax. That's the proof that they're here and have been here and contributing, not taking from the public dole. So they're contributing.
And when they're able to contribute like that, they don't necessarily have access to, Medicaid or any of the other services.
Oh, no,
that are
that's the
offered.
other lie.
Yeah.
That's the other lie that is being told. They are not a drain on our systems. I'm sorry, they're not. Now, undocumented person gets hit by a car and goes to the emergency room. Well, yeah. And so what are they supposed to do in the emergency room? Oh, this guy's undocumented. Sorry. Put him back out on the street. I mean, no, and that's not an undocumented person abusing our system. They don't want to get hit by a car. The situation, I mean, it is a truly humanitarian problem, But to say that foreign countries emptied their prisons and their insane asylums and sent them all to the Mexican and U.S. border is a bald-faced lie. It just is. To say that 80% of people coming across are criminals is too cute by half, because most of those, the crime is that they crossed the border without documents, which they weren't able to obtain before they left where they came from, and there isn't an infrastructure to deal with those documents if they were carrying them. Now, does the U.S. have an obligation to fund such an extensive operation that everybody who does come can be processed? Well, maybe not a moral obligation, but if we're talking about rounding people up wholesale and sending them to other countries without checking whether or not they are citizens or not criminals, which is what we're doing in the name of, well, we're getting rid of all the criminals, is disingenuous if it's not an outright lie. It's a misleading representation of what is actually happening in our name. And this is why our participative democracy is so important. If we as Catholics don't like what the people acting in our names are doing, we need to let them know. Here's another thing that I want to throw out there that is a bit egghead. But in moral law, there's a difference between malum in se and malum prohibitum. So that's Latin. Malum in se, evil in itself. There are some behaviors, some actions which are evil in themselves, like the killing of a human being. In itself, that's evil. Now, there are modifying principles. Self-defense. I'm fighting a moral war, not an immoral war, but we've been attacked and we need to defend ourselves. Malum in se, it's an immoral act that ought to be illegal. I mean, the laws should back up the immorality of certain human acts that are malum in se. They're bad in themselves. Malum prohibitum is something that is bad because it's prohibited by law. It's not inherently immoral, but we've chosen as a society to pass laws like people should not enter this country without proper documentation and vetting. That's malum prohibitum. But to say these are criminals gives the impression that they're in the same category as the murderers. And there's the disingenuity of it. To say 80% are criminals is to mislead the American people. We're left here thinking, oh my God, round them all up and send them out. And that's where we are. Now, the people on the streets in Los Angeles, in San Diego, in Tucson, Laredo, all these border cities, at least the Catholic people, like the bishops and the priests, these people are all their parishioners. These people are their neighbors. And none of the priests or the bishops over time, they might know. I mean, they might know because they get to know their people. But, you have a church full of people. You don't know if half of them have documents or not.
You're not asking for papers at the door.
Yeah, and you're not asking for papers. But they've been parishioners here. They've been here for 5 years. Oh, yeah, their kids in second grade. You got Americans, but some are documented, some aren't. But they're members of our community. They contribute. They're good neighbors, etc., etc. I work with these guys. I go to work with them every day. And then one day in comes military-strapped, masked people and wholesale arrests everybody. And so mom and the kids are back home waiting for dad to come home, and he ain't coming. And they get sent off to another country because they're not being processed.
And maybe not even the country that they came from.
Oh, yeah, there's that too. But they're not being processed. They're being denied due process of law, which is a constitutional guarantee of any person, citizen or not, in the United States of America. And this administration is doing that. They're violating the Constitution of the United States. That's part of why the Catholic bishops have such a problem. Not only is it possibly religiously immoral, or at least religiously not what we teach, but it's violating the U.S. Constitution. And for any American to say, well, okay, it's okay because they're all criminals, which is what the administration would like us to believe. And the unspoken, well, they're all brown. They're not arresting white people. No. Just in terms of actual behaviors, it violates the Constitution of the United States, equal rights.
So if we know this through our church's teaching, and if we know this through the Constitution of our country, how have so many American Christians been led astray and support these policies that are contrary to, again, what our church teaches and even what their local bishops teach?
Well, I do not believe that most Americans who support these policies are racist. I don't believe that. And I don't believe that they think that our government's doing anything wrong because they've been led to believe that they're rounding up criminals. That's what they've been led to believe. Why would I believe that? Well, the President of the United States says that. He wouldn't lie. And in good faith. I'm not comfortable suggesting that, the president might not be above board on everything here. That's a very uncomfortable thing to say. And it also alienates half of Americans. There's a lot of people possibly living in this, if they're still listening, are just pulling out their hair. They just want to strangle me because I'm saying such things. But the demonstrable facts are there. 1 in 3 of the people being rounded up and sent out of the country have documents, they're citizens, or they've committed no crimes. And you say, well, then how would anybody know? By taking them before a judge.
Due process, like you said.
Due process. Before you ship them off wholesale. Would you stand for it? Would any of us stand for that ICE were to come into Missoula, Montana, and stand outside St. Francis Xavier Church and round up 100 people as they come out? Just round them up. Take them to the airport and send them down to El Salvador. Whoa, wait a minute. What are you talking about? What are you talking about? We haven't done anything wrong. Why am I being picked up? That's what's happening to these people. No explanations other than you look like a foreigner. You look like a foreigner, and President says we have a crisis. That one of the cities in Colorado is being run by gangs from Nicaragua. What? That's been said. Things like that. It's like, what are you talking about?
They're eating the cats and the dogs.
Oh, yeah, they're eating the pets. That people can't hear stuff like that and think, well, wait a minute. Wait a minute. It's beyond me. Now, if some person wants to come and say to me, I was mugged and robbed by somebody who could hardly speak English, then I'd say, well, I'll respect your feelings about this. And I don't justify that. I think you're absolutely right. That person should have been caught at the border, which is maybe why we should have funded the border, precisely to pick these types of people up. Maybe that's why we should spend money to make us safe. But the spending money part's always the problem. It's a lot easier. Just round them up.
Well, I have two questions for you, Father, and these are for both types of listeners who are still with us. The first one would be for those listeners who understand this current crisis and who understand the teachings of our church. How do we make a positive impact on the situation? And the second question would be if there's somebody listening to whom this information is new, or they may disagree with what we're talking about, what would you say to them?
Well, first of all, I would say here in Missoula, Montana, the dramas that are playing out in the area of immigration are not playing out here. So I don't think that we ought to be out marching in the streets or trying to stir up a public emotional environment. I don't think that helps anybody. Okay, so don't engage in an argument within our community that doesn't exist within our community. So there's that. Secondly, educate yourself. Read what the Catholic bishops have had to say about this. You have access to the internet. Type in, "You shall take care of the widow, the orphan, and the stranger in your midst," and see how many times that shows up in the Bible.
There's sometimes ambiguity to the Bible. There's story, there's parable, but every now and then we get some very direct communication, and that's one of the ones that's very clearly outlined for us.
A Jewish member of Congress once told me that's the most repeated phrase in the Old Testament. Now, I don't know if that's right, but man, it's there a lot. And really what it is. So in Jewish culture, who was the widow? The widow was the woman who didn't have any rights because she wasn't her father's daughter and she didn't have a husband. And all the women's rights came either through your father or when you got married through your husband. You didn't have any. Same thing with children. If you're orphaned, you ain't got no rights. And if you don't belong to the tribe, which goes to ancient culture, when Cain kills Abel and God says your punishment is you're out, you are kicked out of the tribe. You have to leave. And Cain responds, you can't do that because if I leave, anybody can kill me. That was true because if he went into another tribal territory, he was not a person. You were only a person if you were in the tribe. That was the culture. So you go to a strange land, you're going to get killed with impunity. That was just the thing. And what was God's response to that? No. If anybody does kill you, it's going to come back 7 times on them, which, by the way, is God's, I think, judgment on the death penalty. No, you don't take a human life because he took a human life. You exile him. Prison for life. Okay, that's what you do. But anyway. So, and then along comes Abraham, and God says to Abraham, leave where you are, leave your tribe, and go to a place I'm going to show you. Now, in the same mindset, Abraham's thinking, if I go somewhere else, anybody can kill me. That's what he's thinking.
Sure.
because that was the culture. But Abraham proved his obedience to God and his righteousness by obeying, saying, I put my life in your hands, O God. That's what that's about. So when the Old Testament, time and again, God says you shall protect the powerless. The widow has no man in her life, the child who has no parent in his life, or father, or the foreigner who has no rights within your tribe. These are the people you take care of. Because I am the Lord your God, and I took care of you.
And then Jesus doubles down on that.
Well, sure, he's consistent. Absolutely. It's so dang radical to human culture. I mean, Jesus redeemed human sinfulness. And it's in all of those kinds of systems and things and such. I can sound like I think there's just these terrible evil people that are entirely motivated by doing evil or bad things or mean things or this or that. And it's like, I don't think it's that simple. I really don't. I mean, I really think that most of the people, and certainly most of our people in our city, in our community, in our church, believe or want to believe that the president is a good and honorable man who's telling us the absolute truth and is freeing our streets from evil people with this immigration policy. I think they want to believe that. Now, in moral theology, there's ignorance, which excuses you. You cannot commit a mortal sin by ignorance, by accident. But there's culpable ignorance, which means you refuse to learn what's really going on. That's why I think you need to go to the USCCB website so that the Catholic bishops, in alignment with what the church has always taught, has to say about this, what is actually happening. And so you're no longer ignorant of what's really happening. And then make your moral choice. And what would that be? It would be calling up Ryan Zinke. It would be calling up the governor. It would be calling up the White House, the presidency. For this, and this reason, I believe there needs to be an adjustment because my faith tells me, or my politics tell me, the Constitution has to be followed. It can't be violated because I'm afraid of criminals. You don't break the law to uphold the law.
I like that.
Well, but that's the basic American principle, you know. And loyalty to the President of the United States is not in the Constitution of the United States. I'm sorry, it's not. Disloyalty to the President is not traitorous. It's not being a traitor. To criticize the President of the United States, to criticize politicians, to criticize anybody, is not being a traitor. It's being an American.
It's part of the First Amendment.
It's absolutely. And all the freedoms and all the legal process, legal system, all the structures that have helped to make the United States of America the wonderful place that it is. It is. Place of opportunity, place of relative comfort, cleanliness. We can count on medical services being there. We can count on police departments. We can count on fire departments, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All that stuff because of the guarantees of the Constitution, not the guarantees of the current president.
Or the previous one.
Or the previous
next
one or any. Yeah, but because of the guarantees of the Constitution. I mean, I get it. We're in Missoula, Montana. And I've been in a lot of places, but I'm in Missoula, Montana. Washington, D.C. is a long, long ways away. What those people are doing back there, it's like, oh, my God, I have no idea. I know what they're doing. So to think that we're not being impacted or we can't make an impact, I understand it. I get that. But the fact of the matter is, if we leave it up to people in power to tell us what it is to be a loyal American today and to put America first, who among us in a Catholic family are raising our kids and we're teaching our kids how to behave within the family and how to behave in public? So when you go to school or when you go out to play and are teaching our children to say, me first. Me first. Honey, would you do that? No, I don't want to. Me first. Do we teach our children that? And yet, we have an administration that's saying that. America first. Us first. Do we stand for that as Christians? Is that a political necessity? Now, some people may make the case, well, yes, it is. Yes, it is. So, if it's every nation for themselves, what's going to ensue? What's going to follow? Everybody in the community, you're all on your own. Duke it out. You first. Act as selfishly as you can, and it'll all work out.
Doesn't sound very Christian to me.
And if you're still listening and still pulling your hair out, I get it. I can go a little nuts, sound a little nuts. Maybe I am nuts, but it sounds a little nuts. And it's kind of an argument ad absurdum, to the absurd, right? If America first is played out to its ultimate result as a philosophy of nationhood, woe be us. We Americans might be the last ones standing, but in a world that's not worth living in. Unbridled selfishness, I don't think it works, but it is definitely not the teachings of Jesus Christ. It just isn't. And I think because it's all of those people back there, we kind of think, well, no, I don't really believe that. I believe in being a good neighbor and this or that. Yeah, but in our name, the power of the United States says otherwise.
Culpable ignorance.
If you're not aware of it, it's like, oh, no, I didn't know that. Well, get to know it and then make your own political and moral decisions. So I'm not saying if you're going to be a Catholic or a Christian, you absolutely have to agree with how I've laid this out. You know, I could be as phony a pedagogue as the people out there I think are phony pedagogues. You know, I can make a good case, I think, but I don't want that to be it. Don't think this because I said it. I said it in part because I've read what the bishops have said. I've listened to what the popes have said. I've studied the Bible. That's why I'm saying stuff. And I've had the experience of ministering, quote unquote, being a lawyer for desperate immigrants.
Well, Father, you've given us a lot to reflect upon today, and we are starting to come toward the end of our time. But do you have any final thoughts for us before we close for the day?
Well, so I have a personality type in my life, less so now, but it's still there, that I operate a lot on fear. Now, this shows up in my being a Catholic, in my being a Catholic priest, in my actually being a lawyer, that the law and which side of it I'm on matters to me. And if I am bucking authority or breaking, quote unquote, the law, I'm looking over my shoulder all the time. And so when I say things, part of me is like, do I have this right? Do I have this right? Or am I wrong? And if I decide, well, you know what? I'm sticking by it anyway, even if it's going to get me in trouble. I mean, that still scares me. But on this issue, I find myself, well, this is where I'm coming down. I'm sorry. So if you're still listening and you disagree with me and you see me next time and you feel like you should or need to or want to, come up and say, Father, I heard your thing. I don't agree with you, but we're still friends. Because I do not want to judge my relationships based on issues. I have some family, but mostly friends who disagree with me on so much. And my friendship with them is much more important than winning this argument or any other argument. So I don't want to win the argument if the argument's going to get in the way of being brothers and sisters or friends. And so I don't want to create ill will, and I don't mean to judge anybody who might be disagreeing with me. I'm inviting you to think about these things, perhaps in a different way. You haven't. But if you still say, no, I disagree with you, it's just like, okay, we're still friends, right? And that's what I want. I don't want to walk around distrusting or avoiding or not liking people with whom we disagree. Because the world doesn't need more disagreement. It just doesn't. And that's what I like about Missoula, because Missoula, this is a benign community. I'm sure there's people that aren't benign, but I don't see people flying political flags and driving down the road with political flags. I don't. That stuff's not in my face here. It's not in anybody's face here, and I appreciate that. I like the fact that, and I'm sure people disagree as much here as in anywhere else, but people here are civil enough that doesn't get in the way of being pleasant and kind and friendly. And that's more important than having and winning an argument.
I think there's a lot of wisdom to that, Father, and I appreciate you coming on the show again, and I look forward to seeing you next time.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you all for listening, those of you who survived to the end. Again, above all, there's faith, hope, and love. But the greatest is love. So let's live on that one. Okay.
Amen, Father.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you for being with us today as we walk as pilgrims this road together. If you feel called to learn more, please consider checking out St. Francis Xavier or your local Catholic church. All are welcome into our community as God loves us all equally. If you are interested in supporting the VOXSFX podcast, please visit sfxmissoula.org/donate. Until next time, go forth in peace and be the light of Christ in someone's day.
By Jove, we've got it.